All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Tuesday Night Healing. This is our 16th episode. This one's been postponed actually a lot. You know, with everything that was going on during the holiday season and such, we had to really get things in order, as I explained in the last video last Thursday. But this actually was supposed to be done, I think, 3 weeks ago. So now, we're playing catch up and we are going to get it done. So this week's episode is called Object Permanence and Object Constancy. I have Stormy with me. Stormy, you want to say hi?
Hey everyone.
So we are going to dive right into it. So object permanence, what is it? It means that an object or a person still exists even when they're hidden and you can't see or hear them. So basically that old saying, out of sight, out of mind, that's kind of where that's derived from. This is something that's developed too, like in early childhood, and people, with mental health conditions or, disabilities or anything like that, they have a different way of forming these things, so that's why it's important to talk about. It's not on the normal scale of what, a regular person might get. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit. When I was doing my research a while back about other things, this actually came up and I kept seeing it, and it started giving justification to some of the things that I think about and stuff. So I was like, wow, okay, maybe this is something that we should talk about. So, from my standpoint, like people with BPD, they struggle with like emotional object permanence, meaning that they have difficulty maintaining emotional connections with people or things that are not immediately present in their life. So this struggle can manifest into intense fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, emotional volatility, and the main features of BPD. The main things to get you diagnosed with it stems from this sort of thing. So that's why I felt it was important to speak on it. Even when you see like a lot of other people that talk about BPD and stuff, this isn't really like something that comes up a lot. It's like an untapped well to talk about. And maybe it'll bring more understanding to people who have BPD to understand where these things are manifesting from. So, the foundation of a person with BPD is relentless, and the requirement for validation lies in the principle in the field of development of psychology known as object permanence. To understand object permanence, one not need look further than a baby laughing in a surprise and wonder at a game of, let's just say, peekaboo. The reason this form of play is so amusing to infants is that until a certain age in their development, their brains have no capacity to understand that when the object is in their attention, in this case, like in their face, it disappears from their visual field and has not disappeared from the world altogether. So when the face finally reappears from behind the set of hands to the infant's brain, it's as if the face has magically flashed back into existence. At around 6 to 8 months, however, the brain has developed enough process that when mommy's face disappears, they know that mommy's just hiding, that she's not actually gone. So that's how basically it starts to develop. Like, that's such early stage like that. So, that's why it's so important to know what it is and understand it. And I mean, even that little tidbit about like peekaboo and stuff like that, like it really makes a lot of sense now, as to why a child would be so intrigued at something like that. It's just because their brains haven't developed that object permanence yet. So, above object permanence on the developmental scale is the concept of object constancy. And that is where people with BPD run into major issues. So object constancy allows a child to comprehend that things and people can maintain the same traits even when they're not being actively deserved. So even when a person's not around you and stuff like that, they're still the same person. It's not like they've changed or anything, so what basically like a big thing with BPD, the constant worrying of abandonment and stuff like that. If someone's telling you that they love you, but maybe they're not around all the time, you start to develop opinions. You start to think, well, maybe they're cheating, or maybe they're this, or maybe they don't love me anymore, and that's why they're not doing this. Like, that right there is that object constancy, because it's not in your life all the time right in front of you, and you're getting that constant validation. So the people with BPD, they start to assume the worst, and that's really where the problem starts to kick in. Is there anything you want to speak to that so far, Stormy?
Not on that. I was just gonna say that, like, for me with Hannah, with her autism, I noticed, that it took her a little bit longer to develop it. Definitely a slower rate, and challenges with it to regulate it. which affected her, emotions and things like that. And even till this day, she's still like, if I'm, you know, I used to try to get away here and there, and it was hard because she would freak out and she wouldn't understand. Mom just went away for a day; she'll be back, and she still has that problem sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm sure that could be extremely difficult. Yeah, it's, you know, again, I wasn't a subject I was really familiar with, so to actually learn about this and stuff like that, especially like how Stormy's explaining from the autism perspective, like it's interesting because it brings a lot of justification and stuff as to why these things occur with people who suffer from these things. Object constancy, it originates from the concept of object permanence, so it's a take off of it. It's a cognitive skill that we acquire at around age 2 or 3. It's an understanding that objects continue to exist even when they can't be seen, touched, or sensed in some sort of way. This is why babies, it's so important with babies that they develop this trait, because if not, as they get older and stuff, they're not going to have that, and they're going to start to develop those patterns of not being able to realize that when something's not in your face, that it still does exist. It still matters. Like, these people still walk the earth and still are the same. Things don't change just because they're not there. Now, of course, people evolve and grow over time and stuff, but they're still the same person. It's just it's a psychodynamic concept that we think of as like emotional equivalents to object permanence. Like, they're so similar. And we mature into understanding that our caregiver is simultaneously a loving presence while also a separate individual who could walk away. Now, rather than needing to be with them all the time, we have this internalized image of that person, like, burned in our brain. When you think of your parents and stuff, you can visualize their faces and know what they look like and how they feel about you, that, like, the love and care. So even when they're temporarily not in the room, you still know that they love you. And you could develop that, obviously, in a relationship as well, or a friendship. But the problem is that, when it comes to, people with BPD, it's not always understood, those things. So they have that overwhelming fear of abandonment and such, and that's, where, again, all these problems lie. In adulthood, though, object constancy allows us to trust that our bond with those are close to us remains whole, even if they're not physically around. They could always pick up the phone, rely on text, or, even when they're frustrated with us, we still know that they care and that they're around there. But, again, if you have good object constancy, you're not going to have that feeling of abandonment just because they're not there right now. Because, think about it. You go to high school with people, you're real close, and then after high school, maybe they move on, they start a family, they're doing this. You're not seeing each other as much as you used to. But it doesn't mean that you're not their friend anymore. It doesn't mean that they don't care about you anymore. There's always a form of communication that you can do to keep in contact. But, if you don't have that object constancy, you're going to assume that they don't care about you anymore because they don't call you anymore. You're not rationalizing and thinking about, well, they have a family now, or they live in a different state now, or they have a full-time job. Like, it just doesn't come as frequently. And you need to try to, like, take a step back and start rationalizing and understanding that, because then you can work on the part of feeling abandoned or feeling that they don't care about you. And, it's not even just in BPD or even in autism. There's a lot of things, too, that, if you're friends with somebody and you tell them you feel a certain way about something and they don't necessarily understand what you're saying or believe you or constantly need reassurance, like, it's a thing. Like, they're lacking that object constancy because they're not taking you at your word. They're not listening to what you're actually saying. They're basically so overwhelmed with their fears of things that they're not really taking into account what is actually going on, when on the surface of it, most of the time when people say what they say, they mean it. Obviously people lie and whatnot, but you want to hope that people aren't doing that, that you can hold them at their word, that their word is their bond. But, as someone who's been around liars most of my life, it's hard sometimes for me especially to take people at their word, because every time I seem to do so or put my eggs in one basket, that's when it turns around and bites you in the ass. So it's hard to say. I'm only speaking on it from somebody who clearly doesn't have that object constancy or object permanence. So, but you have to keep in mind too that your parents aren't going to be in your life 100% of the time, even when you're a child. They obviously have to go to work. They have social lives. They have things too. So since no parent can actually be available, 100% of the time, we all suffer at least some minor abuses in learning to separate and individuate. However, when one experienced a more severe early or even pre-verbal attachment trauma, they have extremely inconsistent and emotionally unavailable caregivers or a chaotic upbringing. Their emotional development is going to be stunned at a delicate age, and they never had the opportunity to really develop it. So, like they said, when they're diagnosing borderline, did you have something traumatic happen to you when you're younger, or did one of your parents abandon you, or both? That right there is where this is going to kick in, because it happens at such a young age. Like, my mom left when I was 2, or right before I turned 2. So at that delicate age and stuff like that, that's when this came in, because one of my primary caregivers just was no longer in the picture. So that's where this stems from, and why it becomes so important. And that fear of abandonment is molded and created. And then, obviously as you're growing up, you don't want the people that you're close to leave you and abandon you, significant others, friends, whatever the case may be. But what I found is that in a friendship aspect of it, it's a little bit different from a relationship one. In a friendship aspect, I find myself that if my friends weren't giving me the time of day, or it felt like they were being, I guess, sneaky or talking shit about me behind my back or something like that, I wouldn't turn it into a longing to try to get them to come back. I was quicker to push them away. That I would just be like, I don't need this shit, I'm done with it, and just kind of walk away. Whereas with a significant other, you know what I mean? You find yourself making excuses for people that don't deserve to have excuses made for them. Maybe you're being cheated on, maybe something of that nature, and you're finding excuses to tell them, well, they really do love me, this was just a mistake, or whatever the case may be. You're rationalizing for someone that doesn't deserve it to hold on to that affection. At least in my case, you know what I mean? You want the love more than, the friend that would probably have a better chance of having your back than the person, at least, again, in my case, that's supposed to love you and stuff. So it's tough. It's tough to really... The weirdest thing I found about doing all this stuff, especially going through therapy, is when you think you're a certain way. You think you're an individualist, anything like that. Like, you are who you are. There's nobody like you. You're that unique snowflake. It's that when you can go into a therapist's office and they could say, the reason why you did this is this, or the reason why you did this is this, or this, and they start literally like textbooking it out, that the reason why you act the way that you do and the things that you do are legitimately for a reason. It starts to make you feel like less unique, and it almost like it's healthy to learn about it, but at the same time it takes away what makes you so unique, and that was a hard thing for me to swallow. Stormy, you have anything to speak to that so far?
Yeah, I wanted to stay on the object constancy with her, and kind of what I've seen with you too, with your BPD, is she insists on like routine, sameness. If that's not happening, she gets upset or frustrated. She has specialized interests in objects and things, and so it's a tough thing to get her to be able to tolerate or to integrate new things, and that's because of object constancy. So I've noticed that with you two on certain things, like it's very similar.
And it is. I mean, if you're talking about the scheduling and stuff like that, of course, I have it pre-planned in my head what I would like to have done every day. And if there's any deviation from that, I feel different. Like, I feel weird. Like, if I were to go out on like a Tuesday night, like for example, it would be weird to me. Like, I would just feel off the entire time. Like, I don't like going out of whatever. And I have to pre-plan it almost. So if I know, for example, I have to go food shopping, I do it on the same day every single bi-weekly. I do it every other Tuesday. That's when I get paid, and then that's when I know, like, okay, I already have it pre-planned. That's what's got to get done today. So it's not like it's a new thing for me to, like, it wasn't something that just came run-of-the-mill. And it's the same thing like when it goes to work. If they tell me ahead of time, hey, next week, just prepare, you're going to have to work a long shift, I can prepare myself for it and stuff, and it's not so bad. But if I'm expecting to go home in 2 hours and then they land on me, well, your coverage isn't coming, you're going to be here now for an additional 6 hours. I'm like, you know what I mean? It's too much at that point. Like, I become overwhelmed. It threw off my entire schedule. And then for the rest of the day, even when I do get home, you know, it's all messed up. So, you know, that goes with that, at least with the scheduling, at least. You know, it's a tough thing. It really is. So, the lack of object constancy is at the heart of borderline personality, though. For the insecurely attached individuals, any kind of distance, even brief or benign ones, trigger them to the re-experience. Hello. Their fear could trigger coping skill survival modes, such as denial, clinging, avoidance, and dismissing others, like as I was just speaking out about. You know, lashing out, or even a pattern of sabotaging relationships to avoid that rejection. You know, you sit there and you find yourself, like I was saying before, like with friendships and stuff, you find yourself sabotaging it just to be like, well, okay, like if you're going to leave me high and dry, well, I'm just done with you, and just throw it all away. Same thing with relationships, you know. I have found, too, more in, I guess, a recent thing when it came to dating. I mean, I haven't really done it in a little while, but, you know, when you go out, I found myself sitting there and I would, like, nitpick. You know, obviously nobody's perfect, but I would sit there and I would nitpick, and I'd be looking at this person like, hey, am I really into them? Well, they're like this, or they said this, or they opinioners about this. Like, I'm like losing interest really quickly, and then it's getting in my head like all these like, you know, unchecking things like nope, 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 nope. And then by the time the date's over, I'm just like, no. When in reality, it probably could have been something as, you know, innocuous as like, that could have been overlooked, or that could have been overlooked, or that's really not that big of a deal in the grander scheme of things. You're not, you know, sitting there and coming up with excuses for all these little things and pushing people away. And at the heart of it, you know, a lot of it probably has to deal with that fear of abandonment. You know, when you get burned so badly in a relationship, you know, like I did in my last one, you know, you're always on guard because you don't want to go through that hell again. So you're constantly going to be pushing people away. And, you know, it's not to say that, like me particularly, that I want to be in a relationship, because I don't, but, you know, it's one of those things that you're not giving yourself the availability to do so because you're always fearing the next great tragedy. You're always walking around with that piano hanging above your head, like, when is it going to drop? When am I going to get heartbroken? So, you know, that's why, like we said, you know, we were having this, and you know, most people didn't hear about it. You know, I had a couple people reach out to me, what is this? And I had to give the definition. I think in a few different videos, I said basically what it was, without going into too much detail. But, you know, without that object constancy, one person's going to tend to relate to others as parts rather than whole. You're only going to see parts of people, parts of things that you like, you know, parts of things that you hear in conversation, parts of, you know, all of it. You're not getting the whole picture. It's just like a child who struggles to comprehend that, you know, that your mom's a complete person, or someone rewards them and sometimes frustrated. You know, there's good and bad. You know, your mom or your dad aren't always going to be happy with you. Sometimes there's going to be repercussions if you do something wrong. So to sit there and it'll channel into that black and white thinking, you know, with borderlines, it's hard to see the gray area. So something's either good or bad all the way. So when you have somebody like a caregiver that's, you know, treating you good and being good to you, when you actually have to be disciplined, it flip-flops. Now they hate you, you did something so terrible, and it continues into relationships. But, you know, people without that object constancy can experience relationships as being like unreliable when sometimes they're not, or, you know, very vulnerable. Again, maybe they're not. It could be heavily dependent on the mood of the moment. Like I just said, you know, the happiness, you know, even in relationships, people fight, people argue. You can't be happy all the time. You can't be in a relationship where there's never a disagreement. It happens. You have to be able to see the black and white in that. And again, that's how important object constancy is. It really just stems all of that together. You know, without the ability to see people as a whole, it becomes difficult to evoke the sense and the presence of a loved one when they're not physically present. The feeling of being left on their own can become so powerful and overwhelming that it invokes like a raw and intense and sometimes childlike reaction. Like when an abandonment fear is triggered, shame and self-blame closely follow, which further destabilizes the anxious person's emotions. I mean, because the origins of these things are so strong and the reactions are not always conscious, it would seem, though, that they were unreasonable or immature. But in truth, if we think of them as acting from a place that's repressed or a dissociated form of trauma, and consider what it's like for like a 2-year-old to be left alone or have an inconsistent caregiver, that intense fear and rage would make all the sense. Like I said, it does make sense if you really think about it. If you don't have all that stuff, that's what's going to wind up happening. Now, I always like to talk about one thing in particular. I mean, obviously, other than, borderline, but narcissism. It's a real terrible thing to be with somebody that has that, especially, if you're borderline, because it's like a moth to a flame. I mean, that's the only way to really describe it. So, where does NPD fit into all this? Well, people with narcissistic personality disorder, also known as NPD, can also have a disoriented sense of object constancy. Now, these individuals often have an exaggerated sense of their own importance, which makes them the narcissist in the first place, but they may also have trouble empathizing with others or considering others' desires or feelings to be meaningful to them. So some mental health professionals actually regard a lack of object constancy as the central feature to why a narcissist has that personality disorder. This might explain why the person with NPD can appear to love you one minute and then hate you the next. As soon as you're no longer giving them what they want, the impaired object constancy could keep them from thinking that you're the same person that they formerly adored. When you're not on that pedestal that one moment, now they're berating you, now they're treating you terribly. Like, that was very interesting for me to hear, because it started to piece together a lot of things from, a past relationship that I was in. It was like, wow, okay, so that makes sense now. All that devaluing and all this stuff, if you're not getting that constant high from thinking that person's on such a pedestal, that's why the devaluing, the cheating and the lying and the berating and all that, like, that's where that really stems from. So I thought that was just like an interesting thing that I wanted to throw in there. Now, I guess the question is, can you learn object constancy and like object permanence? Can you learn it after, obviously you're an adult? I mean, I guess you could wonder if you think that, like, if you think it will help your relationship because it's impaired because you believe this to be the reason why. I mean, psychological research has identified that there are techniques that you can do to improve it. It's not guaranteed to come back, that all these issues will just disappear, but, there are ways to start rebuilding that, of course. And, I'm going to go over some of those examples. So mindfulness and practicing mindfulness is a big one. So there was a study that found that low levels of attachment security are correlated with low mindfulness. So a trait describing a person's ability to be aware of their own thoughts and emotions. It's learning to be more mindful, which can help you recognize the distorted mental habits that limit your object constancy and enabling you to let them go. One of the best methods for improving mindfulness is meditation. You can find that even like 10 or even 20 minutes of meditation each day can help you better understand yourself and the people around you. To practice mindfulness meditation, you got to try to relax and like pay attention to your thoughts, what's going on in your head, any sensations that you're feeling, whether they be, internally, externally, and any emotions without trying to judge them or control them. Feeling them. Let your body feel. If you're having physical pain, if you're having mental pain, like, let your body feel it. Try to understand where it's coming from. Try to figure out if this was something real or if this is something being imagined. Try to like really get to the bottom of where all this stuff is coming from. So, it's all about how bad you want it, how hard you're willing to try for it, how hard you will sit there and like get into it to correct these behaviors. Because it's only beneficial if you do. Another good thing would be self-affirmation. So having a healthy sense of yourself can make you feel more secure in a relationship. If you're happy with yourself, if you're confident in yourself, if you feel good about the relationship, you have a better chance of succeeding in it. If you're constantly putting yourself down or thinking you're not good enough to stand in this person's presence, it's going to keep putting you down. Meditation is a helpful exercise in CBT. Yes, there you go. DBT, CBT, you will learn as well that meditation is key. And it's most things in life. There's different methods of healing. You know, people think medication, other people think it's more mindfulness and getting that done. It really depends on your belief. It could work either way. Some people thrive off of taking medication. Other people, you know, think of it as like being put as a zombie, or not being able to feel how you're supposed to feel, how like God intended you to do so, or whatever it is that you believe in. You know, you're supposed to feel these things. You know, there's creation before medication and all that stuff, and people made it this far without it. So it really just depends on your beliefs with all that. You know, one way to do it is to build a positive self-image through self-affirmation, where you write down, you can reflect on things in your life and give them meaning. So it can help you anchor yourself in your personal values rather than, you know, the opinions of others. So, for example, you could put down things like you're proud of. So like I published 2 books. I'm working on a 3rd book right now. Those are things that I'm proud of. I keep like little reminders and stuff around my room. Like I have my college degree right there because I was the first person ever in my entire family to graduate college, and I think I still am. So that's a constant reminder for me. You know, I hang up my artwork and stuff like that around the house. That's another reminder of the things that I can do. Those are good self-affirmation things to show worth. You know, exercise is another big one that people can do. You know, you keep yourself physically fit, you're happy with your appearance. That's going to boost yourself when you're looking in the mirror, you know, and then obviously it'll warrant compliments and stuff like that from people that are checking you out, I guess, on that spectrum of things. So, you know, there's a lot of different things you could do, but you want to keep affirming yourself that you're good enough, that you have what it takes to stand in the arena with everybody. You know, you can't sit there and look at like a significant other or something and say like they're way out of my league, because how do you know unless you try? I mean, you don't. You could assume that, but that's only because you're thinking of yourself as not having that worth, and you are worth something. You just have to find the right person to see it. Another big thing that you can do that's not medication or meditation is therapy. Obviously, you know, we always talk about that, how therapy can be a positive thing. It all depends on finding the right therapist. It really does. And it's tough. It is tough sometimes to find the right one because, like I said, in my history, a lot of them are just sitting there taking your money and talking about themselves. And, you know, you're kind of just left like, well, I'm paying you all this money to listen to your bullshit, but, I mean, why am I actually here? I'm not really getting anything out of this. But psychotherapy has shown promise for improving attachment security and decreasing attachment anxiety. It suggests that, you know, when you're being helped, it's going to resolve your difficulties with object constancy and emotional permanence. Working with a therapist could help you strengthen your ability to relate to other people also in healthy ways. If you're worried that attachment challenges might make it hard to trust the therapist with your thoughts and feelings, you might want to consider like online therapy, where they're not directly sitting in front of you and it's more of a anonymous type deal. Obviously, you know, you can go through video chat, but you can just do it on the phone too, and they don't really know you or see you, and you're not running into them at the supermarket or anything, which actually happened to me one time. I ran into a lady that was treating me, and that was a little strange. But besides the point, you know, there's different ways to get that stuff, especially, you know, with the availability of online and the way things work in the world now. There's so many different avenues to do this, even, again, from an anonymous standpoint. So you don't have to have that object constancy to start talking to a therapist and opening up. You know, a lot of people, they say, get a greater sense of control when they're connecting with a professional remotely rather than in person, because they don't have that stigmatism of being judged. And it may make them more comfortable engaging with the therapeutic process. I mean, the same could be said about these lives that we do and stuff like that. Maybe you're not comfortable being on the live and talking about the issue, but listening to the issue and seeing that there's other people who have the issue might give you the confidence to think, wow, there is hope. There's something I can do about this. I'm getting something from this. I mean, that's the reason why we do this stuff. It's to help others get past that part, to get past that fear of judgment or fear of rejection. You know, you feel like you want to be in a safe space. Like, that's what this is all meant to be, a safe space, so that people can thrive and that people can feel that comfort that they need to feel. I don't know if you guys can hear in the background, but like the whole house is shaking because we're in a storm right now. But that's what that noise is if you hear it. Research on behalf of benefits online therapy suggests that a workable treatment can significantly reduce the symptoms of mental health difficulties, and a systematic review of the scientific evidence found that there was no difference in effectiveness between internet therapy and sessions conducted in person. So you can do either or, and it's still going to benefit you. There's really no difference as far as getting the help. It's just how you're receiving it and how you're feeling it. So, Stormy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, I think you covered everything on that part.
Okay. Well, as far as object permanency and constancy, to close it out, it is so important. And it's so important, too, that when you're a parent and stuff like that, that you understand it so you can provide that for your child when they're young and they're in a developmental stage so they don't develop these problems later. To be mindful that they need you in their life, regardless of whether you feel important or not. They still need you. They need that constant. They need that presence. You need to be able to, even if sometimes, you know, you feel like you can't do it, you need to just dig deep and like really like put forth the effort to make it so that they don't have to grow up with the same difficulties that you did. And that's really what it boils down to. You know, anybody can be mom or dad, but it takes a hell of a person to be a parent. You know, and that's where you really got to learn to step in and do something about it, to break generational trauma, to, you know, put forth a better life for your child than you were given. And, you know, if you were given a good life and you don't have these issues, then that's great, but don't start the generational trauma. You know, if you decide to have a child with somebody, you know, whether it be an accident or whatever the case may be, you know, do the best you can by the child. You may not agree with the other person or want to be a part of that person's life, but do your best with a child to show them that you're a constant. Don't just run away. Don't be that, you know, scenario deadbeat dad or, you know, like, or anything like that. Like, it's more than you at that point. You gave up your life and your freedom and stuff like that because you chose to do this. So stand by your decision and do the right thing. That's really what it boils down to. Because if you can do that and you can be that selfless, especially in the developmental stages, then you just already gave your child an advantage in life by being there. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take taking them to the zoo every weekend or buying them hundreds of dollars of things, you know, and equivalenting, you know, love with money. It's not about that. Something as innocuous as sitting on the couch and watching a movie together, or sitting down and drawing together, or sitting down and just talking. Those are such important things, and they help so much with the development that you need to be there to do those things. You need to give them a safe space and an outlet to develop a bond with you so that they know they can come to you with their problems rather than running to substances later in life, or, you know, not being able to talk to anybody about their feelings and internalizing, and then it just creates even more issues. So you want to have that open communication in that channel. And that's why, like I said, I wanted to do a live on object permanence and object constancy, because it is so important. And again, I would have never known about any of that stuff if it wasn't for these lives of me doing my research on other things, where I kept seeing this thing pop up and then actually reading it and being like, wow, like that's the heart of it right there. That's where all this is coming from. That's where the abandonment and all that other stuff comes from. It comes right from that. So just be mindful of that. You know, and then maybe when you're dealing with individuals and stuff that you know maybe have like issues or anything like that, you know, you want to sit there and just give them the reassurance. Let them know that like you are there for them, you do care for them, you know, you're not going to just abandon them or anything like that. And you'll see that the bond will grow. It definitely will, especially like from someone like myself who enjoys reassurance and, you know, affection and stuff like that. When you're given it, it's a boost. It lets you know that that person really cares about you. And, you know, you have to kind of take a step back. If you get into an argument or something like that, you have to take a step back and think, like, is it really a super important argument? Is this really going to end the friendship or the relationship? Or is this just like a temporary setback we're going through, but then time will heal the wound and we'll get back to what we need to be? And really weigh out those options. Don't just be irrational and jump into something and think that, you know, it's over, it's done, I messed up, like it's the end of the world just because you forgot to, I don't know, turn the lights off in the house. It seems silly, but a lot of people go through it. A lot of people. And I mean, I know plenty of people that feel that same way. That when they, like, you get into an argument or anything like that, they just automatically assume the worst. And it's not always like that. it's not. I'm guilty of it myself in a lot of cases. But you just have to take your time, be patient, know what's at stake, understand and learn about these things, and try to prevent them in the future. Stormy, do you have anything else before I do the closeout?
Nope, no sir.
Okay, so couple things here. First of all, we are going to be doing emotional wellness on our next Tuesday healing. If you guys didn't see, I did put up the schedule not only on our Facebook, but also on the TikTok as well, as what we're going to be looking at doing basically all the way through mid-February up to about Valentine's Day. If you haven't seen it, I'll give you the rundown real quick. These are just for our healing aspects. So next week on January 16th, we're going to do emotional wellness. I believe Steve is going to be joining me, maybe a few other people, to come in and talk about all different perspectives. I know Steve is going to give a perspective about religion and stuff like that, how that helped him with his emotional wellness on a spiritual way and stuff like that. So we're going to get a lot of different opinions. I'm hoping to get like a nice little crowd of different opinions so we can have like our first like real live chat where we're having just opinions going around and we're getting something going. I'm working on it. I'm going to see what I can come up with. So stay tuned for that. If not, then, we'll just run it how we usually do, but I'm working on it. January 23rd. And the ones that are coming up after that have to do with a lot of the things that I was going through when I took my 2-week hiatus from doing this. So that's why I put them on the docket. And January 23rd has to do with impulsivity. We all have our own things with impulsivity, some of us more than others. But, everybody has their different things with that. So there's a lot to speak on with that. January 30th is going to be a more difficult one. We're going to dive a little deeper. I know we talked about in the past when we first started doing this, months ago, we touched on self-harm a little bit, but there's a lot more to dive into with it, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that sort of thing and get that done. So obviously there's a trigger warning with that, talking about that type of stuff. So if that's something that's difficult for you to listen to or anything, feel free to skip that. But if it's something that you think could help you, then, absolutely join in with us. It should be a good chat. Something that, unfortunately, I know quite a bit about from my past. So I thought it was important to tackle that. Now, February 6th, we're going to be talking about relationships. Now, in the past, we talked about toxic relationships. This time, we're going to talk about healthy relationships. We're going to talk about what it means to be in a relationship, how a successful relationship can be achieved, and, things of that nature, like what you should be feeling, what you should be looking for, all of those good and happy things, because that's going to lead us into Valentine's Day. We're going to do our live, obviously, on Tuesday, so it won't be on Valentine's Day, but we're going to talk about intimacy, how it's different for different people, how I hate this word, but I don't know another way to describe it. Love language. I don't know why that word just absolutely pisses me off, but it just does. But we're going to be talking about that, different people's takes on that, and what they like and dislike, and how they show, affection and such. There's different spectrums and different sides to how people do that. Some people, will throw money at it. Some people are overly affectionate. Some people don't like to be touched. Like it's all that. So, we'll call it if you ever played The Sims, we'll call it our woohoo episode. But yeah, that should be a fun one for Valentine's Day. I thought that lined up kind of perfectly. Our schedule on the other side of things. So this Thursday, we're going to be doing chapter 10 in the book, which will put us at the halfway mark of being done with reading Paradise Reborn. The name of that chapter is Pinky Promise. It does have about 4 or 5 different little Easter eggs in it after we read it. Mainly the chapter is basically a conversation between Gwen and Stella. So Stormy's going to come back and do Stella while I do Gwen and narrate it. So we'll get that going. Again, if you haven't followed along with us, the book that I'm referring to is Paradise Reborn. It's my second book. You can always check it out on Amazon. We have the links on the TikTok. It's only $1 for the Kindle. Or you can go on our YouTube and check it out as well, which I'll come back to in a second. January 11th, this week, we're doing chapter 10. following Thursday 11, following 12, 13, 14, so on until we hit chapter 20, which should put us out about March. I think the end of March we'll be finishing. Now, a couple things I changed today. Because we've been doing so much different work outside of the books itself with, the Tuesday night healings and stuff like that, I changed the handle to the Facebook. It's no longer the Paradise Collection. It is author_Nick Bellisi. That way we can have everything on there. If people are searching for our healings, I was told that they can't really find it when they're looking it up because they're looking for like a Tuesday night healing, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the book. And all the tags and stuff I was doing, I was getting a couple complaints about how it didn't match up. So I changed that. So now it's author Nick Bellisi. So everything I'm doing falls under that umbrella. So that has changed with the YouTube. It's also changed on the TikTok. My handle now isn't Nick Bellisi author. It's author Nick Bellisi. I wanted to keep it all in unison. I reposted all the links on our Facebook and stuff like that. The Facebook is still Bellisi's Paradise Collection. I'm going to leave that as such. Until at least the Paradise Collection's done, then we'll go from there. But for now, I'm going to leave it that way. But the new links are posted on the TikTok to get to the YouTube. They're also posted on my personal Facebook, and they're also posted on the Paradise Facebook. So,
and I just wanted to say something real quick.
Mm-hmm.
We got we had the ParadiseCollection.org website, which we're changing to ArthurNickBellisi.com. So once we get that going, we will have the links to the YouTube, to the Facebook, Instagram, all the socials will be redirected to the proper stuff as well.
Yeah, we're doing a whole rebranding type deal to make it so that way it's all centralized, it all gels and everything like that, and everybody looking for the information, they have a way to find it all under the same handle. Because when we set it up, we didn't really know, and I'm sure Stormy could attest to this, we didn't really know what it was going to develop into. I mean, who would have thought we'd have like over 11,000 people on TikTok and over 700 people on Facebook. I mean, I don't have an Instagram because it's not something that I use, but I'm sure that could be something down the line, depending, if it's a wanted thing. But I don't think we thought of it like that, and then it kind of just started taking off, and it developed into what it is. So we're trying to get everything in unison for you guys so you can have all the different outlets, whatever your preferred method of social media is. So, when that's all together, obviously we'll keep releasing updates and, let you guys know where we stand with all of that. But at least for now, the TikTok and the Facebook are in unison. So, with that being said, I have to jump off because I finished chapter 9, so I'm going to give Stormy the sneak peek on that. I would say by the end of the week, I'm going to be halfway done with the third book. And by my timeline, if I'm not mistaken, as long as everything goes good with, knocking it out the way I've been knocking it out, I mean, I can't make any promises, it's just a spitball estimation, but I would say that the book would probably be ready to publish in about 12 weeks from now. That's when I think that would be the first time that it would hit the market. So obviously, like maybe 2 months out or something like that, we're going to start doing some advertisement for it, some more teasers and stuff, and, getting you guys more information and get you hyped up and psyched for the conclusion to the story. In my personal opinion, I think it's coming out really good. I've learned a lot of different writing techniques since the second one, which is still, my favorite, obviously, but I think this story goes a lot deeper. And I think it creates even more bond to the characters that you already know, but then, a few new ones that you don't know. But I think it answers a lot of questions that weren't answered in the first and second book and gives you a really good insight to their lives prior to any of the books and also to current. So it's just something to look forward to. So we're going to be doing chapter 9 tonight, which is called The Old Bait and Switch. So, I'll give you guys, I did promise you for New Year's and stuff like that, that I would give you some teaser and stuff. I'm still working, because I know in my head what I want, but I haven't been able to actually do it yet, because I want it to be perfect in the way that I can see it in my mind. So when I have that complete, then I will give that. I'm sorry for the delay on releasing that, but I guess the teaser I can give you now is that this book will come to a satisfying ending to wrap up the series. It also will give a lot of clarification as to how the characters got to where they were. It's going to give a huge backstory to Pete and his family and their roots in Reedsville. Also, his relationship with Stella and why they have that closeness. And it's really going to bring that together. And, you know, I already have the ending planned out. I haven't written it yet, but I know how it's going to happen. And I really think that it's going to bring a really good closure to the entire series. I am working on another story as well, a personal project of mine. I only have about 25 pages done with it because I'm focusing more on this right now. But that'll be something else down the road. And then I'd also played around with a prequel idea to talk about how the Diligent Company was formed. So that could be something else that we could be diving into as well. We'll just have to see where we go. But I wanted to put out all that big schedule for you guys and stuff to show you what we have coming up, to get you amped up for it so you can kind of pre-plan. I did move the lives back a half hour just because I want to be able to. I found myself when I was doing it later, will tissues be needed for the end? I think tissues will be needed for chapters 10 through 18. I think there will be. I think chapter 10 especially is going to be a very trying chapter. But
I'm gonna say most of the stuff I've heard of this book, I think I've cried every time I've talked to you. But
that is
that's
true.
me. I'm an emotional mess all the time. But I think it's gonna be. It's, to me, book two again. Yes, first book awesome. Second book really my favorite. I can say right now, this third book is on the same par as book two for me personally. So I'm very excited for everybody to be able to hear it and read it. And it's a very emotional going into this last book for me, for sure.
And it is. I mean, it's deep. I would say, though, like in my personal opinion, I mean, I'm obviously just speaking on behalf of myself, but I would say in the beginning of this book, it really is like, it is a tearjerker in some aspects, but in a more like happiness. Like an example would be when you see Pete and Stella's relationship and what it's become and all that since the last story ended. I think there's a lot of like deep emotional ties, and especially from Stella's perspective. I mean, she is finding ways to cope and happiness and stuff like that. So it is really deep in a lot of regards. I mean, some of the communication that Pete and Stella have throughout the book, and that Stella has within her own mind. I mean, there's a lot of like deep things. Like in the first book, Stella's not so forthcoming in talking about what happened, so it's not as in-depth as like the second book. But by this time, 2 years had passed since the first, she's more in tune with what's going on. She's more desensitized to the world around her from the things she'd seen. She's becoming more forthcoming with that, and you see that she is explaining more about her feelings and all that stuff. And it's just the path of the hero. There's that growth. She's having that growth and experiencing these things and letting everybody know what's basically going on, because the third book is told from her perspective. So, yeah, I mean, it could very well be. It could very well be. The ending, though, I think is going to be satisfying for the people that have stuck it through the first and the second book and obviously into the third. I think it's going to be a satisfying ending. I don't think it's going to be something that you're holding on to like, oh, well, that was kind of a boring ending, or oh, I wish it would have ended differently. I think it's all going to come to a conclusion in a very satisfying way. I think so. And it will be somewhat sad, but I would say the majority of it is going to be a positive and happy ending. And you don't usually see that in these types of things. So I think that'll be an interesting take to, not, again, obviously there's always like back and forth, but I think it's going to be a good ending. So with that being said, I'm going to call it a night and jump on with Stormy to do this, and I will see you guys Thursday for Chapter 10, Pinky Promise. Have a good night.